Hello, I'm Michael Cantrell, and you are listening to the Prison Officer Podcast, a place to have a conversation about the forgotten cops that work in this country's jails, prisons, and correctional centers. A place for me to try to make sense of a career spent working inside the fence with some of the greatest people that nobody sees or recognizes for the important job they do to keep this world safe. If you love this podcast, hit the follow button, or better yet, share with your family, friends, or coworkers. Hello and welcome back to the Prison Officer Podcast. My name is Mike Cantrell, and today we're going to talk about Stoicism and how Stoicism can help correctional staff get through the day. But before we go there, I'd like to mention Pepperball. Pepperball's been a sponsor of the Prison Officer Podcast for many years now. I really appreciate the fact that they do sponsor us. It's what allows me to come and make this podcast and communicate with you guys. You know, correctional officers frequently face unpredictable and high-stress situations where quick, decisive actions are crucial. From managing cell extractions to controlling disturbances, Pepperball empowers officers with the confidence and capability to handle many challenges, ensuring both officer and inmate safety. It's trusted by leading correctional institutions. It's trusted by me. Pepperball is specifically designed to meet the rigorous demands of the prison environment. So if you haven't yet, go check out www.pepperball.com. See what they offer. We have a lot of launchers, a lot of different projectile choices. Go see what they can do for your agency and let them know that you appreciate them sponsoring the Prison Officer Podcast. Early in my career, you know, other staff would come to me and they would mention, you know, that I was stoic. And I really didn't know what that meant. They said I had a stoic face and I was hard to read, or that I was very stoic in my decision making. And I hadn't studied Stoicism. I really didn't know what it was. But as I looked into it, read some of the works of Marcus Aurelius, who was a well-known historical Stoic, I quickly became a fan of the ancient philosophy. Now that I think about it, I think corrections is what taught me Stoicism even without me knowing it. You know, learning to keep a stoic face when inmates try to get under your skin, that's something we all do. You know, you've got those door warriors that just try to say that one thing that'll get you to blow up or turn around, and learning to control that and not let them pass that facade is one of the things that we learned very early. I also learned how to respond instead of react to things, you know, and that's a big part of Stoicism. We're going to take a look at that. And it also brings you better outcomes, you know, in an incident if you can respond instead of react. I'm going to go into just a little bit about how Stoicism, you know, works for correctional officers and what it is and how it's so beneficial. Stoicism is a practical philosophy focused on staying steady under pressure, controlling what you can control, and responding, not reacting to chaos. For correctional officers, Stoicism offers a mental framework that strengthens professionalism, emotional stability, and personal well-being. Some of the key principles that we see in Stoicism that work so well for corrections is, you know, the dichotomy of control. You can't control inmate behavior. You can't control staffing levels. You can't control when use of force happens. But you can control your effort. You can control your decisions. You can control your professionalism. You can control your mindset. And when you control those things, it gives you power over the situation. Some more principles that come out of Stoicism, of course, are wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Now, when you think about that, what more could you want in a correctional officer? If they've got those qualities inside them, that's a win, right? So if they're studying those qualities and they're trying to make it better, and if they're trying to be a better person in those areas, that's an absolute win. Another thing that I mentioned this, but another thing that we talk about with Stoicism is emotional regulation. Stoicism trains you to remain calm and remain focused, even when things are stressful. Stoicism talks a lot about duty and service. Officers play a crucial role in maintaining safety and fairness inside our prisons and jails. Stoicism aligns perfectly with that philosophy or with that purpose. But I think a lot of people misunderstand it. Stoicism is not a philosophy of suppressing emotions. It's about mastering your emotions so that you stay grounded and reliable, and so that people can trust the decisions you make and why you make them, that they're not reactive decisions. Corrections is a world of constant chaos for a lot of us, especially if you're working maximum security or working a penitentiary somewhere. But your internal world doesn't have to match the external one. Just because things are going crazy around you doesn't mean that you have to be crazy inside, that you have to let everything affect you. And that's where many of these Stoic principles come from. One of the core Stoic principles is focus on what you can control. Focus on your judgments, your reactions, the choices that you make. Everything else, inmate behavior, staffing, last minute OT, admin changes, all this is outside of your control. You can't control whether or not it happens, but you can control how you respond to it. Can you respond to it thoughtfully? Can you respond to it in a way that doesn't make it worse? A lot of times reacting and throwing a fit and, getting emotional makes some of these situations even worse than what they were. So learning that is a large part of what Stoicism is. Correctional officers often burn out, but not from the job. They burn out from trying to control things that were never theirs to control. And this is a conversation I have with family and friends outside of prison. If you have a family member, why do they continue to do that? Why are they still in trouble? People make choices. You can't make their choices for them. The only thing you can do is decide whether this is something you want in your life and decide how you respond to it. Stoicism teaches emotional intelligence, being able to notice your emotions. We all have emotions. You can't stop them completely. Even the most stoic correctional officer who's able to put that mask on and keep their face from anybody knowing what they're thinking, they have emotions. But are they letting their emotions control them? Or are they taking care of their emotions? And the first part of that is noticing what the emotion is. It's okay when you run up on a bloody fight to feel scared or to feel sympathy or empathy. It's absolutely okay to feel those things. Self-awareness and situational awareness are probably the two most important things that you can do in prison when you work in a prison. Of course, situational awareness is being, having your head on a swivel, paying attention to what's going on around you, understanding what's going on around you. And self-awareness is understanding what's going on inside you and how you're responding and how you're feeling and why you're having those feelings. Are you upset today really because of what's happening right now? Or are you upset because you had something happen before you come into work? Your reactions could cause the thing inside work to blow up. And it could cause it to blow up to the point to where you're now dealing with a more dangerous situation. So, response versus reaction. Reaction is our impulse. It's what, we can control it, but we feel like, I need to say something right now. I need to do something right now, often without putting much thought in it. Whereas a response it's disciplined, right? It's thought out. It's something that we have learned to control, what we can control. And what can officers control, right? You can't control the behavior of the inmates. You can't control the rules that come from on high, but you can control your tone, how you talk to others, what your inflection, what your voice says. You can control your mindset. how you look at the world, your perspective, how you choose to move forward in it. You can control tactical patience. There's times when it's the right thing to do to be patient. Sometimes we don't want to listen to the conversation. Sometimes we don't want to hear what someone says. But the act of patience, letting them talk sometimes, is all that's needed to de-escalate that situation. Officers can control their readiness, right? Remove complacency from your life. Is your equipment in good working order in case you do have to respond? The other thing you can control is your professionalism, how you're seen, how you handle yourself. This carries a lot of weight inside. If we can be professional every day, and I can't go into it right now, I'm working on a project, but I recently saw a stark reminder of how much people and inmates want consistency. And one of the things that they want consistency of is professionalism. They don't want to have to figure out what you're doing today, how you're feeling today, how you're acting today. They don't need, especially in our correctional environment, those inmates don't want to try to figure this out every day. And then when you look at the number of officers in there and they need to figure this out with 20 or 30 officers, no. What makes our institutions run well is when staff are professional and inmates don't have to guess whether or not things are going to be firm, fair, and consistent. Firm, fair, and consistent wasn't just, something that we've just thrown into training. Firm, fair, and consistent has been around for decades. And it's what inmates want. There's no guessing. If staff are professional and they're firm, fair, and consistent, nobody has to guess what the staff member is going to do. So those are some of the things that officers can control. What can't officers control? Well, one thing, of course, is inmate choices. You can have the best intentions in the world. You can do everything right. And that does not mean that an inmate can't make a bad choice. But you cannot control that. You can only control your response to it. You can't control administrative decisions, whether that's the supervisor above you, whether that's the warden of your or sheriff of your agency, or whether that's the federal government. You can't control those things. You can only control your response. The other thing you can't control is other people's attitudes. Not everybody's good at taking care of their attitude before they come to work, or in the coffee shop, or on the way to work, whatever, at home. We can't control that, but we can control our response to their attitudes. And often we can change people's attitudes by our response. So that's why it's so important. Just remember that a Stoic mindset is almost the same as emotional intelligence. And it's essential for officers dealing with confrontation, trauma, and unpredictability. A Stoic mindset and emotional intelligence can help you respond correctly to people who are out of control, to people who aren't making good decisions, to people who are letting their feelings control what they do. So one of the things I often hear about Stoicism is that Stoicism, and there's actually a school of thought called cynicism. We don't use it that way these days. But many people think Stoicism and cynicism are the same thing. That if you don't react to what's going on around you, that you're a cynic. Well, in prison, there are two things that grow very fast, and we don't really want either one of them. One of them is tension. It comes on very quick. It can come on from many different ways. And the other one is cynicism. And I think all of us take a little bit of that with them. I know at times in my life, I have been cynical. I know that I am more cynical after having lived as a correctional officer for 30 years than I would have been if I hadn't done that. We see some of the bad in the world. We see people hurt people. We see injustice, and we take that, and sometimes that becomes cynicism for us. When cynicism comes and knocks on your door, probably the best thing you can do for yourself is to enhance your character, to work on your character, to work to become a better person. And that won't keep you from seeing the things that have made you cynical, but it will help you to understand. It'll help you to engage them in a different way, right? If you take a look at some of the virtues that we all look upon: justice, courage, wisdom, temperance, which temperance is kind of an old word, and in America that's been I think people reference that as meaning that you don't drink, right? Because we had the temperance movement in the 1920s. But in truth, temperance is not letting anything control you completely, right? Not letting it become something bad that controls you, whether that is drinking or whether it's a way of thinking, right? Cynicism. Those things are what keeps cynicism from coming into your life so harshly. After years in corrections, you have eroded trust. People always ask me, what was the hardest thing about prison? It wasn't the fighting. It wasn't the stabbings. It wasn't any of that stuff. I became very cynical because of the manipulation. I felt like, and I felt this at work, and it's true, you are manipulated as a correctional officer all the time. Everybody's trying to get around the rules. Everybody's trying to get around you. Everybody's trying to manipulate the situation. And I took that outside of prison to my life. And I began to believe that everybody was manipulating me. And so that was some of the biggest cynicism I had, was just on the manipulation. But working in corrections, that eroded trust, whatever, and that can take many forms. For me, it was about manipulation. Your worldview. I can absolutely speak to this. I still have some of that in me. I'm a very black and white person, right or wrong. It's hard for me. I have to take time to think about the gray, that there are gray areas in the world. So it does harden your worldview, and it can make bitterness feel normal. And I see that in correctional staff. I've seen it myself. I've talked to other correctional staff who felt the same way, that after a while you just become bitter and cynical, and it's hard to see the good in things. Stoicism offers a way of grounding those feelings. It gives you a way to work with them without letting them take over your view, your worldview, instead of hardening you. Stoicism allows you to step away a little bit, right? To choose what you can control, and to deal with the things you can't control in a productive way. So that's one of the ways that Stoicism works against cynicism, if that makes sense. I'm using a lot of isms here. So how do you fight cynicism? Well, one of the things you can do is, at the end of the shift, take a moment to reflect. What did I do well? Where could I have done better? Did my work today align with my values? And sometimes I have to just find something today that didn't go wrong. Have you ever had that type of day where it seems like everything went wrong all day long? Well, what didn't go wrong? Maybe you just had a good lunch. Maybe you got a surprise phone call from somebody you hadn't talked to in a while. These are things that didn't go wrong. And sometimes we need to focus on those offsets, because if all we focus on is what went wrong, we're going to feel like the whole day was wrong. Whereas if we could find those offsets, if we could find those little things that tell us that the day wasn't horrible, right? I'm alive. I'm still kicking. So let's talk about the Stoic leader and what it takes to lead your agency in a Stoic manner, whether you're a supervisor or a warden or a sheriff or an undersheriff, a jail administrator. What is it that Stoicism can teach us in leadership? I think one of the first things that we're going to talk about is ego and humility. That's really, truly what makes a great leader. Now, there's many other things that we need. We need courage, decision making, a servant attitude. We can name a long list, but if you don't have humility, or if your ego is overblown, that takes away from a lot of the other things that you do well. So, what is humility? What does that mean? Being humble, knowing that sometimes it's better to let others talk about your accomplishments than to talk about them yourself. We all know that person who's constantly telling you about what they've done. And I had an associate warden who told me one time, it's always better to let others read your headlines. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you're trying to read your headlines and trying to get everybody to listen and go, hey, which is kind of a thing these days, social media has caused a lot of that. And I do it myself. I post on Facebook and LinkedIn. Whenever I'm doing something new, whenever I'm speaking somewhere, or I've got a class, or I've had an article published, I post it just like everybody else does. And we tend to do that. We tend to want to show off a little bit in front of our social group. But when that ego takes over and you're always trying to convince the people around you at work that, hey, I did this, hey, I did this, that gets old real quick. And they don't see the humility in it. What they see is a person who's always trying to claim credit. And that becomes dangerous. People will pull away from you if that's what they think you're doing. It's much better if you can read the headlines of the people that work for you and let others know, how well they do. And I'll tell you another lesson I learned from a different AW. We were having it was a family day. And I noticed that he made an effort to really go to everyone's wife or husband and to talk to them for a moment. And of course, I was with him while we were doing this. And I said, wow, that's really nice for you to go over there. And he would speak, I really appreciate everything that your wife does at work or your husband does at work. We couldn't do this job without them. And I was like, that's really great stuff. And he said, there's no greater thing I can give to one of my team members, one of my staff members, than to make their family feel good about them. And I thought that was just amazing. And it's the absolute truth. What do we want? It's nice to get a pat on the back at work, but man, it's even better to get a pat on the back at home. So anything that he could do to let the kids or let the wife or the husband or the mom or dad and let them know how important a job that their person was doing, how important the job was, and why it was important enough for them to be away from home, for the kids, and help them understand that also. But that pays dividends 100 times over. And I was always very impressed when I got to see him do that. And it was something that I tried to take on in my own leadership style. Another thing for leaders, Stoic leadership, people expect calm in chaos. And if you've learned how to understand your feelings, if you've learned how to respond instead of react, if you've learned how to not necessarily show everything that's going on at the moment in your face, that's going to be seen as calm. And if you think back, that's the leaders you want in charge when something's going crazy. On the contrast, leaders that bring in a large ego and that are loud automatically shut down communication. And once that happens, the incident's not going to get better. people stop talking to you. People stop letting you know what's going on. They just start trying to avoid you. And that's never good. You need honesty in a supervisor's position or in an admin position. You need your people to want to talk to you. But if your ego is overblown, if it's loud, if you're always trying to talk over everyone, then you're never going to hear what you need to hear. Another one of the Stoic things for supervisors to think about is, what do you control as a supervisor? You know, as a correctional officer, I only control so much, but how about a correctional supervisor? What do I control? Much like correctional officers, you control the tone you set. You control the culture you set. You control fairness. That's something from a supervisor. That's what inmates want from correctional officers, and it's what correctional officers want from their supervisors. Fairness. As a supervisor, you can model professionalism. You can show people what professionalism looks like. And I think we've lost a little of that. I love seeing when I come across supervisors who they command the room when they walk in because of their professionalism. Another thing that you can do as a leader, a Stoic leader, is mentorship. Teaching others how to recognize their emotions, teaching them how to respond instead of react, teaching them how to make the best decisions for the group. Marcus Aurelius, I believe it was Marcus Aurelius, but there was a quote that said, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." And if we had more supervisors who thought like that, corrections would be so much better, not only for the staff, but for the inmates as well. What brings no benefit to the hive. So if you're doing something as a supervisor, if you're doing something as an admin, and when you think about it, it's not bringing a benefit to the whole hive, it's only bringing a benefit to one or two people or yourself, then it brings no benefit to the bee. And without bees, you don't have a hive. I think it was Senator John Boehner that said a leader without followers is just a man out on a walk, and that's the absolute truth. When you lead, you need followers, and you need to take care of them. So when you make those decisions, think about what's good for the hive, and you will bring what's good for the bee. Some more things that you can do, of course, as a Stoic leader. Praise in public, correct in private. That should be a rule for anybody, but it's something that we can keep in mind. Whenever you get that chance, praise them. And when you have to correct them, do it private. Take them aside. And don't just correct them, mentor them. A mistake shouldn't be only punished. It should also be a time for learning. That's when we learn our best, is when we make mistakes. One other thing that I think Stoic leaders can do is what's called a Stoic pause. When you're giving direction or when you're making decisions in a stressful moment, it seems like you need to say as quickly as possible what your next decision is. But that's not always true. If you can take that pause, give yourself just a moment to think, give yourself just a moment to look inside. What are your emotions saying? What are you seeing? And make a decision that's more of a response than a reaction. That's what that Stoic pause gives you the moment to do. And we almost always have time for that pause. Too often we get pushed into corners. Make a decision, make it now. Take that Stoic pause. Take that moment and make sure that it is a good decision and that it's based on what you're feeling, what you see, what others are telling you. Don't just make decisions for the sake of making decisions. And that's really hard to not do in a stressful moment. You know, the other thing that happens, whatever you want to call it, I've seen it called moral injury from working in corrections. Correctional officers see stuff and they carry stories that the public will never see. That's part of when we go to parties or whatever, and people will tell me what happened. They want to hear the worst story. That's where that comes from. Correctional officers are affected by those things. Let me speak to this, and it's been a while since this came out, but I think it's probably still very relevant. In 2011, they did a study, and correctional officers experienced approximately 254 work-related injuries per 10,000 full-time employees, and this was due to assaults and violent acts. There are roughly 8,000 assaults on correctional officers and security staff each year nationwide. And civilian workers, on the other hand, it's 7 per 10,000. That's a huge difference. That means correctional officers are 36% or 36 times more likely to experience a work-related injury from an assault or a violent act than the average worker in the civilian profession. So we're going to see bad things. We're going to see bad things happen to people we love. We're going to see bad things happen to inmates. We're going to see bad things that most of the world doesn't experience. And a lot of that causes what they refer to as moral injury. You're going to see self-harm. You're going to be forced, and this was a tough one a few times for me, but we're often forced to enforce policies that I don't morally agree with, right? When the Federal Bureau of Prisons went smoke-free, I can tell you the number of use of forces went up tremendously for a bit. And in my mind, I didn't have a reason to back that. I understand why they did it, that it was, health of the inmates and stuff like that. But it wasn't worth, in my mind, all the fights, the shoulder injury that I got during that time that I just had a shoulder replaced. It wasn't worth losing. Cigarettes were a good way to de-escalate. You could have a guy who was going off and take a moment and give him a cigarette and let him smoke a cigarette for 3 minutes and often de-escalate use of forces. So morally, I wasn't behind their decision, but it wasn't my decision to make, and I still had to enforce it. So sometimes we have to do that, and that causes us to think about who we are and why we're doing this job, and is it worth it? Often we feel powerless in those situations. And often we feel unsupported in those situations. You're not listened to, no matter if you've got a good idea or not. The decision's been made. This is what we're going to do, and you just have to live with it. So what does this have to do with Stoicism? Well, Stoicism gives us a couple of things that we can use when we're dealing with these types of moral injury or moral questions. And one of them is, Stoicism allows us to clarify what's our responsibility, what's our sphere of responsibility, and what's the administration's sphere of responsibility. And once you're able to understand that you don't have control over these decisions, those decisions were made by someone else. And if they're not illegal, immoral, that's for you to decide. Then it is part of your job. Having the ability to understand that I didn't make this decision, I'm not responsible for this decision if I feel like it's a bad one, does allow you to set that off to the side. Like I said, unless it's immoral or illegal, and then you have to deal with it in that manner. The other thing it allows you to do is to remember that you can act with integrity. When you're in those moments that you might not necessarily agree with, you don't have to do something against your character. You can still show integrity. You can do things the right way for the right reasons, even if you may not agree with the decisions. You can still choose the right response, if that makes sense. I may have rambled just a little bit today, so I hope that it makes sense. It's something I wanted to talk about. It's something that I use every day that means a lot to me, and I hope it does for some of you. And in the end, the connection between Stoicism and corrections, it's not just abstract. It's not philosophical. It's very practical. It's something we can use every day. We step into an environment shaped by stress, unpredictability, and responsibility all the time. Stoicism gives us a framework to stand there in the middle of that storm and still make good decisions, to focus on what we control, to release or what we can't control, right? To bring discipline and integrity into the job, right? This job that demands more than anything else integrity. By training our minds the same way we train our bodies and our tactics, we build staff that are calmer under pressure, that make better decisions, that are more grounded in the purpose. And when we carry that mindset back home, I hope, the Stoic mindset into our families, our friendships, and our personal lives, we not only become better officers, we become better human beings. So that's the heart of today's conversation. Resilience is a skill. Professionalism is a practice. And that peace of mind that we seek often comes with the way that we make choices. And Stoicism gives you the opportunity to respond and make better choices than react and make poor choices. So I hope you learned a little bit about Stoicism today. Speaking of emotional intelligence, I invite you to go to Amazon.com. Power Skills, Emotional Intelligence, and Soft Skills for Correctional Officers, First Responders, and Beyond. This book came out this year. It's been doing great. For many years, I avoided the words emotional intelligence until a friend of mine showed me that I've been using emotional intelligence for years. And that book is to show you that you've been using emotional intelligence for years. The word, comes out of the psychology area, and for correctional officers, we kind of hang back away from that. We're not sure we want to talk about emotions, but the truth is, almost every correctional officer is a master, has the superpower. It's a power skill, being able to recognize others' emotions, being able to recognize our own emotions, and make decisions based on that. So check out my book. It's on Amazon. You can find the link at www.theprisonofficer.com at the podcast. There's a link on there for that. And before we go today, I'd like to mention Omni Corrections. If you've been around here for a while, you know that Omni Corrections Suite is a fully integrated software and hardware solution engineered to meet the unique demands of correctional environments. Omni LifeSense provides real-time, accurate monitoring of heart rate, blood oxygen levels, skin temperature, and location across your inmate population, with continuous data for reporting purposes and instant alerts for emergencies. It empowers your team to respond faster and more effectively, enhance safety, streamline emergency response. Check out Omni Corrections at www.omnicorrections.com. And while you're there, let them know that you heard about it on the Prison Officer Podcast. I thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed this today, and I will talk at you soon. Have a great day. If you enjoy these podcasts, the best way to support the Prisoner Officer Podcast is to share these episodes with your friends or family on social media. Let me invite you to visit www.theprisonofficer.com. If you haven't already, check out the Prison Officer Podcast on Facebook and click that little follow button. Or leave us a message, or better yet, leave us a review. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google, or Spotify, please click the subscribe button. Till next time, I'm Mike Cantrell. Watch your back, and please take care of each other out there behind those walls.